What's up, YouTube? What's up, film lovers? I am CM Towns, and I like movies, so I'm going to talk about movies, specifically my Letterboxd year in review. Now, according to Letterboxd, I watched 550 films. That's what I logged in. Technically, there's some TV shows in there and a short or two, but definitely over 500 films. I reviewed 166 of them, and the total hours was 935. So, yeah, pretty good. So, according to my Letterboxd, my number one actor this year was, or in 2024, was Vincent Price. I watched 8 movies from him, 5 of which were actually rewatches: The Raven, The Great Mouse Detective, House on Haunted Hill, House of Wax, and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, even though that's really just an audio cameo because he does the voice for the Invisible Man for a brief scene at the end of it. I've never actually seen his Invisible Man. I've only seen the original with Claude Rains, directed by James Whale, and fucking love that movie. But one day I'll get to the Vincent Price Invisible Man. The 3 new films I watched were The Last Man on Earth, which is one of the adaptations of I Am Legend. I've seen that, Omega Man, and the Will Smith I Am Legend. I give that one a 2.5 out of 5, The Last Man on Earth. I like the beginning of that film. I like a lot of the scenery, but after the first 30 minutes of doing all the setup stuff, I just don't really care anymore. The other 2 were noir films where he plays a supporting part, which are The Bribe and The Las Vegas Story. Now, after him, it doesn't say this, but on my actual stats, Winona Ryder, Ida Lupino, Bill Murray, Katharine Hepburn, and Zoe Saldana are my next most watched actors. Each has 6 films. Zoe Saldana, however, those were all rewatches. Winona Ryder, most of them rewatches, with like exception of The Crucible. I didn't look up Bill Murray and Katharine Hepburn, but I wanted to talk briefly about good old Ida Lupino. For those who don't know, she was a trailblazing actress, director, writer, producer. She made 6 theatrical films, one of which is in the National Film Registry. The Hitchhiker, or The Hitchhiker, yeah, The Hiker. I forget the name of the film. I can't believe I forgot the name of the film. It is The Hitchhiker. For some reason, because there's the classic 80s film with Rutger Hauer, so sometimes I think they have different titles. But I've seen all her theatrical films. The Hitchhiker is arguably the best. She's the first woman to direct an American film noir. But my favorite film of hers is Hard, Fast, and Beautiful, which is kind of a sports movie. And I also love The Trouble with Angels, which she did with, I believe, Rosalind Russell and Haley Mills. That one, absolutely great. So I've seen all her theatrical films, but as far as actors goes, I only rewatched one movie, which is The Bigamist, which has Joan Fontaine, the guy who played Santa Claus in Miracle on 34th Street. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Here we go. Edmund Gwynn and Edmund O'Brien. The Bigamist is interesting because it's also, this is another thing that Ida Lupino did as a director, because she's the first woman to direct herself in a film as well, at least in the States. But as far as new films I saw with her, The Hard Way, The Big Knife, The Man I Love, Moontide, Ladies in Retirement, all noir films. Ladies in Retirement is interesting because it's what they would call noir by gaslight, meaning it takes place before electricity. So, and that one has Elsa Lanchester in it, who, if you don't know, she was the Bride of Frankenstein, but she's in a ton of things. All those films are good. They're not favorites, but I love Ida Lupino, so I just go through her film catalog quite a bit. As for directors, Alfred Hitchcock, 6 films. They were all rewatches. Alfred Hitchcock is my favorite director there, but there's still like 10 or 15 films of his that I haven't gotten into because I either don't care to go into watching silent films. Some silent films I like, but on majority, not a big silent film guy. And the other ones are films that aren't like big parts, like people don't really care about Under Capricorn or Torn Curtain all that much. So it was just me rewatching my favorite Hitchcocks. But after him is Joseph L. Mankiewicz, which I rewatched The Ghost of Miss Muir. It's one of my favorite romantic films with Gene Tierney and Rex Harrison. I love it. The other 5 include The Suddenly Last Summer, which is one of my Katharine Hepburn movies. It's a Southern Gothic with, I think, Elizabeth Taylor. I didn't care for it. I didn't even rank it because I got so bored and I kind of struggled to watch it. But I loved A Letter to 3 Wives. It's a very good. I think someone would call it a noir film. I don't know. It's a very melodramatic film with Ann Southern, Linda Darnell, Gene Crane, as well as Kirk Douglas before he really broke out. That one, fantastic film about three women. They're doing like some volunteer work with some kids, and they receive a letter from a woman they know who's claiming to that she's running off with one of their husbands, and there's a bit of flashback sequences. It's almost like anthology like, but it's excellent, excellent film. The other ones I saw from him were House of Strangers and Somewhere in the Night. Both of those are noir films. So, yeah. My highly rated are Long Legs and Honora. They were in my top 5. I already did that list on YouTube. But you see, The Queen of Villains. Queen of Villains is a miniseries on Netflix about the rise of real life Monster Hill Joshi Puroresu wrestler Dump Matsumoto. If you don't know anything about Japanese women's wrestling, that's fine. But there was a promotion once called All Japan Women's, not to be confused with All Japan Pro Wrestling. Similar names, but AJPW started like 10 years later. But AJW was the first women's wrestling promotion in Japan. They kind of got sort of big in the 70s a bit. They dipped, and then they got really big like sort of 80s through the mid-90s. If you know WWE, Bull Nakano, who finally made it into the Hall of Fame, my all-time favorite female wrestler, one of my all-time favorite wrestlers right there. She started in All Japan Women. In fact, there is an actress in here who plays her. Bull Nakano got started when she was 16, I believe, and she was like the henchwoman for Dump Matsumoto. Dump Matsumoto struggled to get into the promotion. She really wanted to be a wrestler, but she struggled until she came up with the heel persona, and she took violence in women's wrestling to a whole new level. She liked to stab people with scissors. Yeah. And it's a fantastic miniseries on Netflix. Not a lot of people were talking about it outside of the wrestling space, but it was my favorite Netflix thing from last year. So yeah, check out Queen and Villains if you haven't seen it. And my first film of 2024 was Ferrari. Gnarly crash scene in that movie. Best part of that film. It's like a 3.5 out of 5. It's a solid movie, though with some questionable accent work from a particular actress, but the crash sequence in that is 5 stars. My final film of 2024 was Last Action Hero. Just it's a fun film. I saw bits of it when I was young, but I avoided it because everyone said it was bad. I watched it a few years ago. I thought it was a blast, and I rewatched it. I still think it's a little too long, but it's funny. It's got some pretty good action scenes, and Charles Dance is absolutely fantastic as the villain in that movie. And it also has Sir Ian McKellen. It's like a kind of a wild cast when you think about it. Top movie week, according to Letterboxd, was October 28th through November 3rd. So it takes me at the end of all the horror movies I was watching in October, right into Noir-vember. I kicked off the 28th with the 2 films, The Vampire and The Vampire's Coffin. These are Spanish-language Mexican films. The Vampire, a very famous film out of Mexico. I gave it 3.5 out of 5, and its sequel, 2.5 out of 5. I bought the Indicator Blu-ray. I still think it was a good purchase, even though I was mixed on the second film. The first film's a classic. 29th, I watched Amok. It's a Gielli film. I had it on my watch list for a long time, and eventually I just broke down and stole it from OK-Ru. All you film nerds know about OK-Ru. But then it showed up on Tubi, so I watched it there. Barbara Boucher, absolutely beautiful, really good, the best thing in that movie. The movie also has Farley Granger in it. What an interesting career. Two of Hitchcock's greatest films, a couple very classic noir movies, and then he's in like The Prowler and then a bunch of Gielli films. So very interesting career right there. The Entity, very famous 80s horror flick, not a slasher. It's one of Scorsese's favorite films. First time I saw it about 5-6 years ago, I didn't much care for it. I thought it was okay. I liked it better on a rewatch here, but it's heavy subject matter. That same day, I watched the short film Alice in Movieland. The director, Gene Nicolesco, famous director, did How to Marry a Millionaire with Lauren Bacall, Marilyn Monroe, and Betty Grable. Very good movie. My favorite film of his, though, is Johnny Belinda, which won Jane Wyman the Oscar. This very famous short film stars Joan Leslie, who's been in a number of classics herself. Come on, bring that up. Foreign Correspondent, High Sierra, Yankee Doodle Dandy, Sergeant York, but I really like her from the Western Woman They Almost Lynched with Audrey Totter. It's one of my favorite Westerns. And then I also ranked Agatha All Along that day because that was the last episode. On the 31st, I watched 5 movies. 3 of them were fan re-edit work prints, including 2 Friday the 13th, Part 2, and Part 2, one of my favorites, 4 out of 5, and Part 3, The New Blood, the one where he basically fights the telekinesis, whatever. 3.5 out of 5. What happened is someone edited the deleted footage or into the movie. Of course, some of this footage, at least definitely in the case of 7, bad VHS copy rip, but it's very cool to see it in there. And with 7, I thought it definitely. I didn't realize how weird the editing was until the finished product until I watched this version. Hellraiser Bloodline. This was the director's copy. I think it flows better than the film we got, but of all the Hellraisers I've seen, and I've only seen 4, the first one is still far and away the best. That same day, I was watching these 2 last movies with my grandma. Night of the Eagle, aka Burn Witch Burn, which is how I know it. One of the great movie posters and one of my all-time favorite witch films. And then top the night off with Cabin in the Woods, my second favorite film from the year it actually came out in theaters, not the 2011 it says there, because I think it really came out in 2012. Dread is my favorite film from that year. Going into New November, I started with 4 films. Started strong with Follow Me Quietly. This is like a 60-minute film. It says in my review, did Steve Ditko base the question which kinda, yeah. It looks like the question. They dress up a dummy to look like what they think the suspect looks like, but they don't know what the suspect's face is, so it's just a blank face. But yeah, it's a pretty cool film. I bought a Warner Archives DVD. I caught Strange Alibi. I forget how I watched that one. The Bribe, which is The Bribe is probably best known for the fact that it gets used extensively in the Steve Martin film. I forget the name of the Steve Martin film. Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid. It's a tribute to noir films, and a lot of the ending is taken from this film because that's how the scenes with Vincent Price and Charles Lawton in that movie come from The Bribe. That's what this is best known for. And then I ended the day with House of Strangers from one of the Mankiewicz directed this one, Joseph L. Mankiewicz. Solid film. I do like my Edward G. Robinson. So yeah, the second, Highway Dragnet. The second of multiple movies that month I watched with Richard Kant, and it has the legendary Joan Bennett. Horror fans will know her from Suspiria or Dark Shadows. Before that, she was also one of the great femme fatale actresses, and she was also in Where No Angels and Father of the Bride. She's one of the all-time greats. The same day, I went out and saw Anora because it was out. My second favorite film of 2024. And I rewatched Hold Your Man, hanging out with my grandma. I am a huge Jean Harlow fan. She is my favorite film actress. It's one of the multiple movies she did with Clark Gable. Then back to the noir films with The Guilty, which you can see I'm not a big fan of, 2 out of 5. The Woman on the Beach, 2.5 out of 5. But I ended up with Framed, starring the legend Glenn Ford, whose famous noir film, Gilda. Also, Superman, he plays Pa Kent, and the great western 3:10 to Yuma. I don't see it. Yeah, here it is. This is a good one. Experiment in Terror is one of my favorite films of his. He's also in the slasher Happy Birthday to Me. Yeah. So, quite a week. I really did knock those films out. Actually, real quick, I want to mention the actress in this I thought was really good. Didn't do a whole lot of films. Janice Carter. I thought this was fantastic role in Framed, but unfortunately she had a very brief career in Hollywood, but she was great in Framed. Yeah. So I like the whole most watched genre, country, and language section, and also the highest rated one. And my highest rated, my most watched country and language are always USA and English, but when you put it to highest rated, it's much more fascinating. My highest rated was actually Argentina, but I only watched like 4 or 5 films for Argentina. But my second highest rated language was actually Spanish language films, and I watched quite a bit this year for Spanish language films, most of which were from Mexico, but several of which were Argentina. Some of two of the 3, 4 film, whatever. A few of them I scored like 4.5 up to 5. It was a really good year. I want to watch more classic movies from Mexico and Argentina because what I've seen has been absolutely fantastic. When I did my favorite first time watches, I mentioned the one of my favorite first time watches from Argentina, If I Should Die Before I Wake, 5 out of 5. Fantastic film. Unfortunately, not streaming anywhere. When it came to Mexico, it was Victims of Sin was one of my favorite films of the year. And then following that, Salon Mexico and Aventura, absolutely fantastic films. And that's just the tip of it. So I really hope I'm not sure this year, but I really wish there was more legal ways to stream Mexican and Argentinian cinema. And then, of course, my highest average, lowest average, most popular, obscure. Highest average was Autumn Sonata by Ingmar Bergman. I get his name wrong, first name wrong all the time. But it stars Ingrid Bergman. No relation. I like Ingrid Bergman, one of the all-time great actresses. This one's about a mother and daughter. The mother's visiting because she was invited out, and she's surprised to see her other daughter there who's recovering. She's ill, and then there's like the daughter getting off all, a lot of emotional mother-daughter talk. This is a very acting film, and it's also one of the only 2 movies where I've heard Ingrid Bergman and her speak Swedish, and she's a Swedish-born actress, so always interesting to hear. It's very interesting to see an actress I know pretty much exclusively from English language movies speak her native tongue. My lowest average was Trigger Warning, the Jessica Alba Netflix movie, which I give like 2.5 out of 5, I think. My most popular was Barbie. I opened up the Blu-ray I had. I love the movie, so 5 out of 5. My most obscure was Strange Alibi, which I mentioned I watched during that weekend, which I logged 21, 22 things onto Letterboxd. I really don't remember Strange Alibi all that well. So, yeah, I think there's a good reason why it's obscure. It's also so obscure on Letterboxd doesn't have a aggregated score for it. So, that's fun. And that is essentially my Letterboxd year in review. So, I didn't do as well as some people. I see some people on Letterboxd logged in 800 films. They watched hundreds of movies that came out in 2024 where I did 75. Look, I like a third of what I watch every year is a rewatch, and then the other stuff I am also just trying to catch up on all of these areas of cinema. I'm trying to watch more horror movies, more noirs, hit the blind spots I miss, and dig deeper into particular subgenres. But I have this year I'm going to have some plans for almost every month I'm going into, but I'll talk about that in some other videos. But thank you for watching. I'll see you later.